Before we dive into Megan's breaking point, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If you've ever been mocked by family, laughed at instead of defended, or made to feel like your efforts didn't matter, you are not powerless. It is never too late to stand tall and protect your dignity without shame. But standing tall often comes with a heavy price: the worry of being pushed aside, the second guessing about speaking up, and the overthinking that can steal your peace. That is why I am so proud to share our new guide, 7 Ways to Stop Overthinking After 60, simple practical tips to feel peaceful every day. Inside, you'll find clear, practical steps to quiet the noise of family drama, release the guilt that weighs you down, and finally claim that calm, steady peace you deserve each day. If you're ready to take back your peace, I invite you to learn more by clicking the first link in the description and in the pinned comment. And if this speaks to you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of women who chose dignity over disrespect. Because what happens when Megan finally decides she won't stay quiet after her daughter-in-law's cruel dog food joke is something you will not want to miss. The moment my daughter-in-law joked about feeding my Christmas dishes to the dogs, my hands froze on the serving spoon. I had just set down my casserole, hot from the oven, when Vanessa's voice rang out across the dining room. "Don't worry, everyone. If we run out of food, we can always feed Megan's dishes to the dogs." The room went still. Then came the sound I'll never forget: a few polite chuckles, a nervous laugh from my son Aaron, and the scraping of silverware as guests pretended they didn't hear what they heard. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Megan, that's me, Megan Ruggles, 68 years old, widow, mother, grandmother. I've spent my whole life feeding people, and in that moment, the woman my son married reduced everything I'd worked for to dog food. I smiled tightly and lowered myself into a chair, careful not to spill the sweet potato casserole that had taken me nearly 2 hours to perfect. The dish was steaming, fragrant with cinnamon and nutmeg, the kind of thing my own mother used to make. But the joy I normally felt at bringing food to the table slipped right out of me when Vanessa's words landed. Aaron sat at the far end, trying not to look at me. He gave a half smile, the kind you give when you don't know what else to do, and then he looked down at his plate. My own son couldn't find the strength to defend me. The table was crowded. Aaron's new boss and his wife were seated by the Christmas tree. A few of Vanessa's friends from her yoga class were there too. I could see the way their smiles faltered, eyes flicking back and forth, unsure if they should laugh or not. Most of them chose silence. Nobody wanted to cross Vanessa. I sat quietly, folding my napkin in my lap, letting the chatter pick back up around me. But inside, I felt like I'd been slapped. I had woken up before dawn that morning. My old oven takes twice as long to heat, so I started the ham before the sun even rose. My kitchen smelled like cloves and brown sugar for hours while I mashed potatoes, baked cornbread, and stirred gravy. I had spent the last of my grocery money for the week just to make sure everything was right. And now, here I was listening to my daughter-in-law tell a room full of people that my food belonged in a dog's bowl. What made it worse was Aaron's reaction. He laughed, not loudly, not cruelly, but he laughed all the same. My son, who once told me no one made cornbread like his mama, chuckled at his wife's joke instead of speaking up. I reached for my water glass to steady myself. My hand trembled just enough to make the ice clink against the sides. Nobody noticed. Not Aaron. Not Vanessa. Not anyone. "Pass the rolls," Vanessa said cheerfully, like nothing had happened. And the evening went on. Plates were filled. Glasses were topped off. Laughter floated through the house, but none of it reached me. I listened to Vanessa brag about the new curtains she ordered from some designer in Chicago. I listened to Aaron's boss talk about their golf trip in Florida. I even listened as one of Vanessa's friends leaned over to whisper how lovely the table looked. But all I could hear was that one sentence echoing over and over in my mind. Feed Megan's dishes to the dogs. I looked at the food I had prepared. The golden crust of the cornbread, the creamy potatoes whipped smooth with butter, the casserole bubbling at the edges. None of it mattered. Not here. Not in this house where I was a guest in my own son's life. It wasn't the first time Vanessa had made a comment like that, but it was the first time she'd said it in front of so many people. And it was the first time Erin laughed. That laugh cut deeper than her words. I swallowed my pride along with my water, setting the glass down carefully. I kept my mouth shut. I knew if I said anything, the rest of the night would turn into a scene, and I didn't want to ruin Christmas for the grandkids. They were in the living room, tearing through their presents, squealing with joy. I wouldn't take that from them. So I stayed quiet. I sat through the entire dinner, smiling when spoken to, nodding when appropriate, keeping my hurt locked inside my chest where nobody could see it. But the truth is, I felt humiliated. I had never been so embarrassed in my life. By the time dessert was served, my stomach ached from the knot that had formed there. I couldn't eat a bite. I excused myself early, saying I wasn't feeling well. I gathered my empty casserole dishes, the ones nobody had touched, and carried them back to my car. It was snowing lightly, the kind of snow that sparkles under streetlights, but even that couldn't lift my mood. My car was cold, the steering wheel stiff under my fingers, but the worst chill came from knowing my own son had sat by while his wife mocked me. Driving home, I replayed the moment again and again. Her voice, his laugh, the look on the guests' faces. It all pressed down on me until I could hardly breathe. I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickering like it always does, and sat there in the car for a long while. I didn't want to go inside. The house would be quiet, too quiet. George had been gone for 6 years now, and nights like this made the silence unbearable. Finally, I forced myself inside, set the dishes on the counter, and leaned against the sink. My kitchen, once warm with the smell of Christmas cooking, felt hollow now. I told myself I'd forget it. I told myself I'd let it go for the sake of keeping peace. That's what women of my age have always been told to do, isn't it? Swallow the hurt. Smile anyway. Be grateful just to be invited. But deep down, something cracked. I didn't say a word that night. Not one. But I felt the sting settle in a place I couldn't ignore anymore. And that was only the beginning. When I finally set my purse down that night, standing in my quiet kitchen with the clock ticking on the wall, I knew I had to be honest with myself. This wasn't the first time I'd felt like an outsider in my own son's home. It had been building for years, ever since Erin married Vanessa. Let me tell you a little about me, so you'll understand how we got here. I was born and raised right here in Ohio, and except for a few vacations, I've never lived anywhere else. I married my husband, Charles, when I was just 21. We bought a modest house in Springfield, raised Erin in it, and built a simple but steady life. Charles worked at the paper mill until he retired, and I picked up sewing work at home to help make ends meet. I was the one neighbors came to when they needed a hem fixed or curtains shortened. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept us comfortable. 6 years ago, I lost Charles. Cancer took him quick. One day we were sitting at the kitchen table making plans for our garden, and the next I was planning his funeral. After that, I couldn't keep up the old house. The stairs, the yard, the bills, it was too much for me alone. So I sold it and moved into a smaller home on the other side of town. Just 2 bedrooms, a little porch, and a patch of grass out back. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. I live mostly on my Social Security check, and I still take in small sewing jobs. I hem prom dresses for neighborhood girls, fix buttons for church friends, things like that. It doesn't make much money, but it keeps me busy. The truth is, though, what really keeps me going is cooking. That's the one thing I still feel proud of. I don't have a big garden anymore, but I still cook the way my mama taught me. I handwrite recipes on cards, some so faded I can hardly read them anymore. When I stir a pot of soup or roll out pie crust, I feel close to her and to Charles. Cooking is how I've always shown love, and it's the one way I thought I could still stay connected with Aaron and his family. But when Aaron married Vanessa, things started to change. At first, I was hopeful. Vanessa was younger than him by a few years, always put together, the kind of woman who wore high heels even to the grocery store. She worked in marketing, knew how to talk to people, and seemed determined to climb her way up in the world. I thought she'd bring a spark into Aaron's life. It didn't take long, though, before I noticed her sharp edges. She was quick to correct me in small ways, telling me I didn't need to bring homemade food when we visited, or that the kids didn't like old-fashioned toys. She insisted on buying store-bought desserts, saying they were more professional than anything I could whip up. At first, I brushed it off as her being young, but the comments kept coming. When she and Aaron bought their big new house in Springfield's nicer neighborhood, things got worse. She wanted everything to look perfect for guests, the furniture, the decorations, even the food. She liked to brag about the caterers she hired, the imported wine she served, the way her dinner parties set them apart. She would smile at me sweetly, but always made it clear that my way of doing things didn't measure up. And slowly, my relationship with Aaron started to slip away. He used to call me every week, sometimes just to ask how to fix something around the house or to tell me about the kids. After Vanessa came along, the calls got shorter, then fewer. He said he was busy with work, but I knew it was because Vanessa didn't want me too involved. She liked having control. What hurt most wasn't just her words, but how Aaron went along with them. He never argued, never told her to stop. He just smiled, nodded, and went quiet. That's the way he's always been, peacemaker, avoider. But when the person you love stands by while you're belittled, the silence can cut deeper than the insult. I can't tell you how many nights I've sat at my little kitchen table with a plate of food in front of me, wondering if I was becoming a burden, wondering if maybe Vanessa was right and I was just old-fashioned, out of place in their shiny new world. Still, I kept trying. I baked cookies with the grandkids when they visited. I brought casseroles for holidays. I made the dishes Aaron grew up on, thinking maybe they'd bring him comfort. Sometimes he'd smile and say, "Thanks, Mom, just like old times." And for a moment, I'd feel needed again. But those moments got fewer. That Christmas dinner, when Vanessa joked about feeding my food to the dogs, it was like all the little cuts of the past years came together in one blow. And Aaron's laugh, that quiet, uneasy laugh, felt like a door closing on the last piece of closeness we had. I didn't argue that night. I didn't raise my voice. But as I sat alone in my house afterward, I realized something had shifted. I had spent 6 years swallowing my grief, swallowing my loneliness, swallowing insult after insult just to keep a place at their table. I had convinced myself it was better than being left out completely, but I couldn't keep doing that anymore. That Christmas night, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. The days of me sitting quietly while my son's wife chipped away at my dignity were coming to an end. Christmas morning started the same way it had for me every year. I tied on my old apron, pulled out my recipe cards, and set my kitchen in motion. I may live in a smaller house now, but I still believe a holiday meal should be cooked with care. I set the ham in the oven first, covered with brown sugar and pineapple rings held down by toothpicks. While it baked, I started the stuffing, tearing bread into cubes, just like my mother taught me. I fried onions and celery in butter until the smell filled the whole house. Then I added broth, sage, and pepper, stirring until it looked right. Next came the green bean casserole. I mixed the beans with cream soup, sprinkled on fried onions, and set it aside. I whipped potatoes until they were smooth, dropping in extra butter, even though I probably shouldn't with today's prices. Then came the cornbread, golden and sweet, baked in my old cast iron pan. Finally, I rolled out pie crusts and filled one with apples, the other with pumpkin. By the time I finished, my kitchen was warm and steamy, windows fogged. My feet ached, but I felt proud. This was the food I had always made for Aaron, food he grew up on. I loaded everything into carriers, wrapped them in towels to keep warm, and carried the heavy dishes out to my car. I don't mind telling you, it wasn't easy. At my age, lifting a ham that size and juggling pies on icy steps is no small task. But I did it because I wanted my family to know they were loved. I even stopped at the store the day before, though I shouldn't have with my budget. I spent more than I had planned. Social Security doesn't stretch far, and sewing jobs have been thin this season. But I told myself, it's Christmas. It's worth it. When I pulled up in front of Aaron and Vanessa's house, the driveway was already packed with cars. I carried everything inside one load at a time. My arms shook, but I managed to set the dishes down on their long dining table. Vanessa was standing near the fireplace in a red dress that shimmered under the lights. She was holding a glass of wine, laughing with her friends. She turned and glanced at me, her smile tight. "Oh, good," she said, loud enough for everyone. "Megan brought food too. We'll have plenty." Then, almost under her breath, but still clear enough, maybe even enough to feed the dogs. People laughed, polite little chuckles. Aaron gave that awkward laugh of his, the one he does when he doesn't want to choose sides. He rubbed the back of his neck and looked down at the floor. I froze for a second. My face felt hot. I wanted to walk right out the door. But instead, I kept quiet. I arranged my dishes on the table while Vanessa waved over a server carrying trays from a catering company. "Imported cheeses," she announced, "and lobster bites, just flown in yesterday." She pointed to the sparkling wine chilling in a silver bucket. "From Italy." She made sure to say imported and from Italy more than once. Every guest nodded, impressed. I stood by my cornbread and pies, feeling smaller by the minute. This wasn't new. Over the years, she'd made dozens of little comments like that. She once told me my potato salad was a little too simple for a summer barbecue. Another time, she joked that my kitchen smelled like the 50s when I brought over homemade soup. Once, when I wore my church dress to their party, she whispered to Aaron that I looked a little behind the times. She never said it directly to me, but I heard. I always heard. I swallowed it all down because I wanted to stay close to my son. I wanted my grandkids to know me, so I bit my tongue. I told myself not to make trouble. But that night, standing in her dining room with everyone watching, her words hit harder than ever. She had mocked not just me, but my food, the very thing I poured my love into. The table filled quickly with her store-bought platters. Guests made polite comments about the presentation, the fancy labels. A few tried my food, but most didn't. They stuck to the catered shrimp, the cheeses, the glossy desserts. I sat down at the far end, folding my napkin, listening to conversations that floated around me. I heard about golf trips, new cars, designer handbags, all things I couldn't relate to. I smiled when someone looked my way, nodded when spoken to, but I felt invisible. When dinner started, Vanessa lifted her glass and thanked everyone for coming. She praised the caterer. She praised Aaron for working so hard. She even praised herself for pulling it all together. She never mentioned me or the food I had carried in. I cut into my ham and took a bite, but I couldn't taste it. My stomach was too tight. I forced myself to chew and swallow, but every word I heard only pressed the insult deeper. Vanessa leaned into her friend across the table. "See, It looks fine. I told you she insists on bringing food. Old habits die hard. They both laughed softly, thinking I couldn't hear. But I did. Aaron sat beside his boss, nodding through small talk, glancing at me now and then but never saying a word. He saw. He heard. But he stayed silent. That laugh of his earlier, it stung worse than anything. A son should protect his mother, not laugh along when she's mocked. But he had chosen to keep peace with his wife instead of standing by me. I kept my head down. I ate what little I could, and I reminded myself of the grandkids in the living room. Their squeals of joy over new toys were the only thing that softened the ache in my chest. I didn't want to ruin their Christmas by causing a scene. So I swallowed the humiliation. I stayed quiet, just like I always had. But as I sat there, staring at the flickering candles on Vanessa's perfect table, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like a deep, heavy sadness mixed with the start of resolve. For years, I had told myself that silence was the price of belonging, that keeping peace was worth more than defending myself. But in that moment, I wondered if maybe peace built on disrespect wasn't peace at all. The meal went on. Plates passed back and forth. Laughter rose and fell. And when it was time for dessert, people complimented Vanessa again on her perfect evening. I gathered my dishes as soon as I could without drawing attention. I carried them to my car one by one, the cold air biting at my hands. And as I drove home that night, I knew something had changed. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing: I couldn't keep swallowing this kind of treatment forever. Would you have spoken up at that table, or sat quiet like I did? Hit the share button so other women can weigh in too. I didn't sleep much that night. I tossed and turned, my mind stuck on the moment Vanessa's words cut through the room. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her laugh, then saw Aaron's face when he tried to play along. It played like a record I couldn't shut off. When the morning light crept through my curtains, I felt heavy. I made myself a cup of instant coffee, the kind I drink every morning, and sat at the kitchen table. My dishes from the night before were still stacked by the sink, untouched, as if mocking me. I kept hearing that sentence, "Feed Megan's dishes to the dogs." I told myself not to cry. At my age, I thought I'd built up enough skin to let insults roll off. But it wasn't just about the words. It was about the silence from my son. That's what hurt the most. I sat there for a long while, staring out the window at the bare trees, and I made a choice. I wasn't going to bring it up to Aaron. Not a word. He'd just defend Vanessa or tell me I misunderstood. I knew how that conversation would go, and I wasn't going to put myself through it. I took a slow sip of coffee and said out loud to nobody, "Just let it go, Megan. Just let it go." That's when the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I picked up, I heard her voice. "Vanessa, Megan, oh, thank God you answered." Her tone was nothing like the night before. She sounded frantic, rushed, like someone about to burst into tears. I stayed quiet, letting her talk. "The caterer for our New Year's Eve party canceled. Can you believe it? They just called this morning. They said they're overbooked and can't take us. I don't know what I'm going to do. Aaron's new boss is coming, and some very important clients. This party has to be perfect." I raised my eyebrows but kept my voice even. "That sounds stressful." "You don't understand," she continued, words spilling fast. "If this dinner doesn't go well, it could really hurt Aaron at work. He's under so much pressure. This was supposed to be our chance to show everyone how well we host. And now," she let out a dramatic sigh, "now it's all falling apart." I leaned back in my chair, listening. She paused for just a moment before saying the words I never expected. "Megan, I need you to help me. Please. Could you cook for the party? The same dishes you made for Christmas. Everyone said they were wonderful. I almost dropped the phone. Wonderful. 2 nights ago, she joked about feeding my food to the dogs. Now, suddenly, it was exactly what she needed to impress people. I took another sip of coffee before answering. You want me to cook? Yes, she said quickly. Your food is always so comforting, so homey. Just what we need. My friends love that kind of thing. And Aaron's boss, he'll appreciate a real meal, not just fancy appetizers. You'd be saving us. I let her words sink in. Comforting. Homey. Saving us. She was laying it on thick, and we both knew it. Part of me wanted to remind her what she'd said the night before. I wanted to ask if dog food was good enough for her guests now. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I said softly, "That's a big request. Vanessa." I know, she rushed. And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. We'll pay for the groceries. Of course. Just tell me what you need, and Aaron will run out and get it. Please, Megan. You're the only one who can help us. I could almost hear the panic in her voice. The same woman who barely acknowledged me at her Christmas table was now begging me to save her reputation. I glanced at the recipe cards still scattered across my counter. I thought about the hours I had spent cooking, the money I'd stretched thin, and the way she dismissed it all with one cruel joke. Now she wanted that same effort to rescue her. I let a pause stretch before answering. Well, if it's that important. Her relief came out in a rush. Oh, thank you, Megan. You don't know what this means. I'll have Aaron call you tonight to go over the details. I'll cover everything. Just please help me make this party a success. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it back down. The irony was thick. One night I'm humiliated. The next morning I'm her savior. I couldn't help but laugh to myself, though it wasn't out of humor. I washed my empty cup and looked out the window again. The snow was falling light and steady. Somewhere deep inside, a thought began to form. For years, I had swallowed my hurt. I had let myself be dismissed, overlooked, and mocked just to stay close to my son and his family. But now Vanessa was asking me to step in, to hold her together in front of the very people she wanted to impress. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment I'd stop being the quiet one. After I hung up with Vanessa that morning, I went about my day as best I could. I folded laundry, patched a tear in a neighbor's dress, and swept my little kitchen floor. But my mind kept circling back to that phone call. Her voice still echoed in my ears, nervous, desperate, pleading. You're the only one who can help us. It was almost funny. The very woman who had laughed at my food less than 24 hours earlier was now insisting I was the only person she could depend on. That evening, my phone rang again. This time it was Aaron. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than usual, "Vanessa told me she talked to you. About the party." I kept my tone even. "She did." He hesitated, then continued. "This party is a big deal for me. My boss and a few clients are coming. If it goes well, it could mean a promotion down the line. If it doesn't, well, let's just say it won't look good." I could hear the weight in his voice. He was nervous. I thought back to when he was little, how he used to look at me before a big test at school, needing reassurance. That same boy was still there, just older, with more expensive worries. "So, what are you asking me, Aaron?" I said, "I'm asking you to help us. To help me. Mom, I know Vanessa can be sharp sometimes, but this isn't about her. This is about me, about my job, about our future. Please, just make the dishes you made for Christmas. Everyone loved them." I almost laughed. Everyone loved them. Did he forget his wife's joke? Did he forget that he laughed too? But I didn't let my feelings show. Instead, I asked, why not hire another caterer? I tried, he said quickly. Every place is booked solid for New Year's Eve. It's too late. Mom, you're the only one I can count on. There it was again. The same words Vanessa had used. You're the only one. For a moment, I stayed quiet, letting him sweat. Then, I sighed gently, like it was a tough decision. Well, if it's that important to you, Aaron. His relief spilled out right away. Thank you, Mom. You're saving me. I'll cover the groceries, whatever you need. Just make it like you always do. Simple, perfect, home-cooked. That's what people remember. I said, all right, and we ended the call. When I set the phone down, I sat back in my chair and folded my hands in my lap. I let the quiet of the house sink in. On the outside, I had sounded agreeable, cooperative, willing to jump in and save the day. That's the role I had always played. The dependable one, the quiet helper, the one who filled in the gaps when nobody else could. But on the inside, I felt something very different. For years, I had been treated like background noise in my own son's life. My food dismissed, my traditions brushed aside, my efforts overlooked. And now, when things were falling apart for them, I was suddenly the solution. I realized in that moment that I had a choice. I could give them exactly what they wanted, the way I always had. Or I could remind them of what they had done to me. Remind them that words and actions carry consequences. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I wouldn't let this chance slip by. The next day, Vanessa called again. She had a list ready. How many guests were coming, what time the food should arrive, and which dishes she wanted most. She was all sugar this time, her voice sweet like honey. Megan, your pies were the star of Christmas. People couldn't stop talking about them. I held back a smile. Is that so? Yes, she said quickly. And your ham. Aaron said it was the best he'd ever had. That's what we need for New Year's. Real, hearty food people will remember. I gave her the same calm answer. All right, Vanessa, I'll take care of it. She gushed her thanks, going on and on. I let her talk, nodding even though she couldn't see me. When the call ended, I stood in my kitchen for a long while, staring at the faded recipe cards taped inside my cabinet doors. Each one was worn from years of use, little notes scribbled in the margins. They weren't just recipes. They were my life, my love, the way I cared for my family. And she had called it dog food. Now she wanted that same food to impress her husband's boss. I shook my head slowly. All right, Vanessa, I whispered to myself. You'll get what you asked for, just not in the way you expect. I went to bed that night with my plan still forming. I felt calmer than I had in years. Because for the first time, I wasn't just going to swallow the hurt. I was going to use it. Be honest, did you smile a little when you pictured that dinner falling apart? If you did, subscribe and share this with someone who needs that satisfaction today. And if you didn't smile, then tell me in the comments why, because maybe you've never been dismissed the way I was. The morning before New Year's Eve, I bundled myself in my old coat, grabbed my grocery list, and headed out. The store was packed, as it always is right before a holiday. Carts bumped into each other, people rushed down aisles, and the shelves looked picked over. Still, I found everything I needed. Ham, potatoes, beans, flour, sugar, spices. I even picked up a few extras so I wouldn't look suspicious. I paid with the money Aaron had slipped into an envelope for me. He told me to buy whatever was necessary. I tucked it in my wallet without comment. For once, I wasn't pinching pennies. But even as I pushed my cart through the snow to my car, I thought about how many times I had used my own money to provide for them without ever being thanked. This time was different. Back in my kitchen, I laid everything out on the counter. I looked at the recipe cards taped to my cabinet door, the same ones I'd followed for decades. My handwriting had faded on some of them, ink smudged from flour-covered fingers. They were full of love, full of years of family memories. I pulled one card down, the one marked holiday ham. My eyes lingered on the notes I had written years ago, a little more brown sugar. Don't forget the cloves. I thought about how many Christmases Charles and I had shared that ham with Aaron at the table. Then I set the card back and said softly, "Not this year." I began with the potatoes. Normally, I whip them until they're light and creamy, adding just enough butter and milk to make them smooth. This time, I dropped in more salt than any person would want. I stirred it through, tasted a spoonful, and nearly winced. Too much. Far too much. Exactly what I intended. Next came the beans. The casserole was simple: cream soup, beans, onions on top. I sprinkled in cayenne pepper, just a little at first. Then I added more, enough to burn. I knew one bite would make eyes water. The stuffing was next. Instead of balancing the flavors with herbs, I left it flat and heavy. No life in it. Just bread soaked until it turned soggy. The kind of dish nobody would go back for. The ham took the longest. I glazed it as usual, but I let it sit too long, making the outside hard. Not burned, just tough. Enough that carving would be a chore. Finally, the pies. Pies are where I usually shine. My crusts are flaky, my fillings rich. But this time, I measured sugar lightly, on purpose. The apple pie turned out sour, the pumpkin pie bland. The smell was right, but the taste would disappoint. I stood back and looked at the spread on my counter. To anyone else, it looked perfect. Golden crusts, steaming dishes, glossy glaze on the ham. But I knew better. I had put my years of practice into making food that appeared wonderful, but wouldn't hold up past the first bite. For years, I had swallowed bitterness. This time, I stirred it into the food instead. As I worked, I thought about how many times I had been the quiet helper, how many times I had brought food, cleaned up after parties, watched the kids, all without thanks. I thought about how Vanessa had looked down her nose at me, calling my ways old-fashioned. And I thought about Aaron, laughing instead of standing up for me. I wasn't out to destroy them. I didn't want to break my son's career. But I did want them to feel what I had felt. Embarrassed, dismissed, left with a taste they couldn't wash away. By late afternoon, every dish was packed. I wrapped them in foil, tucked them into carriers, and loaded them into the trunk of my car. Snowflakes fell soft as I drove across town. My hands gripped the steering wheel, steady, calm. When I pulled into their driveway, the house was glowing with lights. Cars already lined the street. I carried the first load of dishes to the door, and Aaron met me halfway. "Mom, thank you," he said, relief plain in his voice. "You're saving us." Vanessa came up behind him, her smile wide. "Oh, Megan, everything looks perfect. I knew I could count on you." I set the containers down on their kitchen counter, arranging them neatly. "It should be enough for everyone," I said quietly. Vanessa peeked at the pies, clapped her hands together. "These will be the highlight of the night. I can already tell." I smiled politely. Inside, I felt a different kind of satisfaction. Aaron helped me carry the rest of the food inside. Once everything was placed on the counters, Vanessa touched my arm lightly. "Really, Megan, I don't know what we'd do without you." I only nodded. "Well, I'll leave you to it. You've got a house full of guests to entertain." She looked surprised. "You're not staying?" "Not tonight," I said. "This is your evening." Aaron looked like he wanted to say more, but he held back. He hugged me quickly, whispered, "Thanks again, Mom," and turned back toward the dining room. I slipped out the door, the cold air brushing my face. I walked to my car, climbed in, and pulled away slowly. Through the window, I could see the warm glow of their house. I knew in a short while the guests would sit down to eat. They'd take their first bites, expecting homemade comfort, and discover something very different. I drove home with a calm smile, the kind that comes when you finally stop swallowing your pain and decide to hand it back where it belongs. By the time the first car pulled up to Aaron and Vanessa's house that evening, My food was already set on their long dining table. From the outside, it looked like a picture-perfect spread. The ham sat in the center, golden under the lights. The casseroles steamed gently, and the pies looked as though they belonged in a magazine. No one would have guessed what I had done. Guests arrived in coats and scarves, shaking snow from their shoulders as they stepped inside. I wasn't there, but I know the rhythm of those parties well. Coats handed off, glasses of wine offered, chatter filling the rooms. Vanessa thrives on moments like this, showing off her home and her style. She must have felt proud as people admired the decorations and praised the setup. I imagine her leading them into the dining room, smiling as she gestured toward the food. All homemade, she probably said, taking credit without blinking. I can see Aaron standing nearby, nodding along, relieved that things looked like they were falling into place. Plates were filled, silverware clinked, and then came the first bites. It started quietly, just puzzled looks around the table. Someone chewing slower than usual, glancing down at their plate as if the food would explain itself. One man shifted in his chair, took another bite of potatoes, and reached immediately for his water glass. "That's salty," he said carefully. Across from him, a woman coughed after tasting the green bean casserole. "Is there pepper in this?" "My goodness, it's spicy." A younger guest tried a forkful of stuffing, frowned, and set his plate down. "What happened here?" "It's so soggy." The pies were no better. A slice of apple was pushed away after 2 bites. "Tart," someone whispered. The pumpkin earned only a polite smile before being left untouched. The room, once filled with easy conversation, grew quieter as more people realized the same thing. Glasses lifted again and again as guests tried to wash away the flavors. Vanessa's smile must have faltered by then. She was probably darting around, trying to reassure people. "Oh, maybe it's just a little heavy on seasoning this year. These things happen." But her voice, usually smooth and confident, would have cracked under the strain. Aaron, I know, would have turned red. He never handles embarrassment well. I can picture him sitting stiffly, stealing glances at his boss, wishing the ground would swallow him whole. And his boss, that's the image that makes me smile even now. A man like that, invited for an evening of fine hosting, lifting his fork and then lowering it quietly. He probably forced a small laugh, made some polite comment about being full too quickly, and set his napkin down earlier than expected. In the middle of it all, I was at home. My little house was quiet except for the sound of my kettle whistling. I poured myself a cup of tea, settled into my chair by the window, and listened to the distant pop of fireworks beginning outside. I didn't feel guilty. Not one bit. For years I had put my heart into meals, only to have them brushed aside. I had spent more hours than I could count trying to earn appreciation that never came. If they felt a little humiliation in front of their guests, it was nothing compared to what I had felt sitting at their Christmas table. I sipped my tea slowly, the warmth spreading through me. I thought about Aaron's laugh when Vanessa made her cruel joke. I thought about the way she had begged me afterward, desperate for the same food she had mocked. And I thought about the looks on their faces when they realized the meal wasn't going to save them. Back at their house, I imagined the evening unraveled quickly, guests murmuring to each other, pushing food around their plates, some slipping away from the table to the living room, pretending to admire the decorations instead of facing another bite. One by one, plates were left half full, napkins folded neatly beside them. Aaron's boss, a man with little patience for nonsense, probably stood up before dessert even ended. He would have shaken Aaron's hand, offered a polite but short goodbye, and gathered his coat. "We should get going," he likely told his wife. Others would have followed his lead soon after, each excuse sounding thinner than the last. By 9 o'clock, the glow of Vanessa's party must have dimmed. Empty glasses sat on tables. Dishes were left barely touched, and she, the woman who prided herself on perfect hosting, stood in her own home with nothing left but embarrassment. I leaned back in my chair at home, pulled a blanket over my lap, and watched the clock move toward midnight. The fireworks outside grew louder, filling the sky with light. My phone stayed silent. No calls, no messages, just the calm hum of my own house. I thought about Charles then. He would have chuckled at the whole thing. He always told me, people will only treat you the way you allow them to. I realized I had finally taken his advice, even if it took me years. As the fireworks burst outside my window, I closed my eyes and breathed easy. The evening at their house was ruined, but here in my quiet little place, I felt peaceful. For once, the humiliation wasn't mine to carry. The morning after New Year's, I had just finished sweeping my porch when I saw their car pull up. I knew right then they weren't here for a friendly visit. Aaron got out first, shutting the door harder than he needed to. Vanessa followed, her heels clicking against the walkway like nails on glass. They didn't bother to knock. Aaron pushed the door open, calling, "Mom, we need to talk." I stepped back from the doorway, broom still in my hand. "Well, good morning to you too," I said. Vanessa brushed past him, eyes sharp. "Don't play innocent, Megan. You know exactly what you did." I set the broom aside and folded my hands in front of me. "And what's that?" "You ruined our party," she snapped. "You sabotaged the food on purpose. People couldn't even eat it. My reputation, Aaron's reputation, was humiliated. His boss left early. Do you realize what that means?" I stayed calm, letting her words roll through the room. Aaron stood behind her, his jaw tight, looking more tired than angry. Finally, I said quietly, "What's wrong?" "I made the food just like you suggested, perfectly fit for the dogs." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting. Vanessa's face drained of color. Aaron's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. I let the words hang there, the same words she had used on me in front of a room full of people. Except this time, there was no nervous laughter, no audience to hide behind. Just the truth bouncing back at her. Vanessa stammered, pointing a finger at me. "You're twisting things." "That's not what I meant." I tilted my head. "No, because that's what you said. And my son here laughed right along with you." Aaron shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, come on. It was a joke." "A joke." I cut in sharper than I intended. "Aaron, you sat there while your wife called my cooking dog food. You laughed while the guests looked down at me. That wasn't a joke. That was humiliation." He looked down at his shoes, silent. Vanessa crossed her arms. "You could have just said something if you were upset. You didn't have to ruin an important night for us." I met her eyes steadily. "I spent years saying nothing, years biting my tongue while you chipped away at me. The potato salad, that was too simple. The dress you said made me look behind the times. The soup that smelled like the 50s. You think I didn't hear? Do you think I don't remember?" Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no quick response. I turned toward Aaron. "And you've let her treat me this way. Maybe not with words as sharp as hers, but with your silence. Your silence told me you agreed. And last week, your laugh told me the same." He finally looked up, his face pale. "Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't want to make a scene." "A scene," I repeated softly. "So it's better if I sit there quietly, feeling smaller and smaller, while everyone pretends not to notice. That's easier for you." He rubbed his forehead, not answering. Vanessa stepped forward again. "You've blown this out of proportion. It was one comment." "No," I interrupted firmly. "It wasn't one comment. It was years of them. And I let it go every time because I wanted to keep peace. because I wanted to be near my son and my grandchildren. But keeping peace by swallowing disrespect isn't peace at all. It's surrender, and I won't do it anymore. Aaron looked torn, caught between us. Mom, I know Vanessa can be harsh sometimes, but she's under a lot of pressure. She didn't mean... She meant every word. I said, steady as stone. And so did you when you laughed. The room went quiet again. I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. Vanessa finally broke the silence. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. Do you know how hard it will be to fix this? People will be talking for months. I gave a small shrug. Now you know how it feels. I sat at your table on Christmas, listening to whispers, watching faces turn away while my son laughed. That was my humiliation. Maybe this is yours. Aaron's shoulders slumped. He turned toward me, his eyes tired, softer now. Mom, I really didn't think. I didn't realize how much it hurt you. I held his gaze. That's the problem, Aaron. You didn't think. You didn't see. You let me be the punchline because it was easier than standing up for me. His eyes dropped again, but this time I could tell the words landed. Vanessa scoffed, throwing her hands up. This is ridiculous. We came here for an apology, not a lecture. I shook my head slowly. If you came for an apology, you came to the wrong house. I have nothing to apologize for. I cooked what you asked for. If it wasn't to your liking, maybe you should be more careful what you say about people who help you. Her face flushed red. She turned on her heel, muttering under her breath. I'm done with this. She stormed toward the door, heels clicking faster this time. Aaron lingered, standing in the middle of my living room like a boy caught between two choices. He looked at me, then at the door, then back at me. Mom, he said quietly, almost to himself, I didn't realize how much I let her words shape the way I treated you. I didn't say anything. I wanted him to sit with it, to feel it. He rubbed the back of his neck, the same nervous habit he had as a teenager. I laughed that night because I thought it was easier, but it wasn't easier. It was just cowardly, and it hurt you. I see that now. For the first time in a long while, I saw in his eyes the boy I had raised, the one who used to run to me when he scraped his knees, the one who once said I was the best cook in the world. That boy was buried under years of silence and compromise, but he was still there. I let out a slow breath. All I ever wanted, Aaron, was respect. Not praise, not gifts, just respect. He nodded slowly. I understand. Vanessa's voice carried from outside. Aaron, let's go. He stayed another moment, eyes searching mine. Then he turned toward the door, shoulders heavy. I watched him leave, unsure what choice he would make in the long run. But for the first time in years, I felt steady. My voice had been heard. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass when Vanessa stormed out. Her voice carried down the street as she called for Aaron to hurry up. I stood in my living room, broom still propped against the wall, and waited to hear his footsteps follow hers. But they didn't. Instead, Aaron stayed planted in the middle of the room, his hands shoved into his pockets. His shoulders rose and fell as if the weight of the night before was finally pressing down on him. He didn't look at me right away. He just stared at the floor like a boy caught doing something wrong. Mom, he said quietly, almost to himself, I've ignored things I shouldn't have. I didn't answer. I wanted him to keep talking. He shifted on his feet, the same way he used to when he was about to confess breaking a window with a baseball. Vanessa says things she shouldn't, and I let it slide. I told myself you didn't mind, or that you didn't hear, but you did, and I let it keep happening. His voice cracked a little. I laughed when she made that joke about your food. I laughed, and I saw your face, and I still didn't stop her. I felt something loosen in my chest hearing him say it out loud. From outside, Vanessa honked the car horn. Aaron winced but didn't move. He looked toward my kitchen. "Can I get a glass of water?" I nodded. He walked slowly, like he was dragging his guilt behind him. I heard the cabinet creak open, then silence. When I turned to check, he was standing there, frozen, staring at the inside of the door. Taped, there was an old recipe card. The paper had yellowed, the corners curling, but the words were still clear. Aaron's favorite Sunday pancakes. My handwriting, smudged with years of use, stared back at him. He reached up and touched the card gently, like it might fall apart under his fingers. "You still have this," he whispered. I leaned against the doorway. I never took it down. His shoulders sagged as he kept staring. I remember standing on a stool, right here. You let me stir the batter, even though I spilled half the flour on the floor. A small smile tugged at his mouth. Dad laughed so hard that morning. He said no one had ever made pancakes with such a mess. His face softened, but his eyes turned glassy. He whispered, "You've always taken care of me. Every birthday cake, every Sunday breakfast. And I've let Vanessa treat you like you didn't matter." The car horn blared again outside, but he ignored it. He shut the cabinet slowly and walked back to the table. He sat across from me, his eyes wet, his hands folded like a boy asking forgiveness. "Mom," he said, steady this time, "I'm sorry. Not just for last night. For years. I let her words go unchecked. I let her make you feel small. And you're the one who's always been there for me." I looked at my son, grown but suddenly young again in the way he sought my eyes. I spoke softly. "Respecting myself may mean losing you both, but that's better than losing myself." He shook his head firmly. "No, Mom, you're not going to lose me. I want my kids to grow up knowing you, the woman who taught me how to cook, how to love, how to stand tall. I don't want them learning that silence is easier than standing up for family." His words were rough, not polished, but they were real. I reached across the table and took his hand. His grip was warm, strong, trembling just a little. We sat there for a long moment, no words needed. The sound of the horn outside grew faint, as if Vanessa finally drove off without him. Aaron finally sighed. "I don't know what this means for my marriage. I can't pretend this didn't happen, but I also can't let her keep treating you this way. Something has to change." I gave his hand a squeeze. "That's for you to decide. All I know is I won't sit quiet anymore. I love you, Aaron, but I love myself too." He nodded, blinking away the tears. "I understand, and I respect that. It wasn't a grand resolution. There were no promises of perfect change or easy answers. But it was a start. For the first time in years, I felt my son truly saw me, not just as his mother, not just as someone to keep the peace, but as a person who deserved respect. The recipe card still hung on the cabinet door, a quiet witness to the moment. I thought to myself that maybe, just maybe, the boy who once spilled flour across my kitchen floor was still there, older, flawed, but still capable of remembering what love looks like. And for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. If that recipe card moment touched your heart, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And if it didn't move you, comment below and tell me why, because I can't imagine how anyone could see a mother's handwriting and not feel something. After Aaron left that morning, my house grew quiet again. I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, and thought about everything that had happened. The Christmas insult, the desperate phone call, the ruined New Year's Eve dinner, the confrontation. It all swirled through my mind like a storm finally settling into calm. For most of my life, I thought keeping peace meant staying silent. I thought being a good mother and grandmother meant saying yes, even when it hurt. But the older I get, the more I realize silence can sometimes be the very thing that lets disrespect grow. I didn't ruin that food because I wanted to be cruel. I didn't do it to destroy my son's chances at work or to embarrass my grandchildren's parents in front of important people. I did it to hold up a mirror, to show Vanessa and Aaron exactly how it feels to be dismissed, to be laughed at, to be treated like you don't matter. It wasn't revenge for the sake of revenge. It was a lesson, one that words alone couldn't teach. In the days that followed, word of that New Year's Eve disaster made its way through their social circle. A neighbor dropped by to return a sewing project and mentioned it casually. "I heard the dinner was a flop," she said, shaking her head. "Some people said they couldn't even finish a plate." She laughed softly. "Guess perfection is harder to pull off than it looks." I just smiled and kept my thoughts to myself. At church the following Sunday, I overheard two women whispering about it near the coat rack. Vanessa's party was supposed to be the event of the season, one said, but everyone left early. They say she's been quieter than usual since. Quieter. That word settled on me like a soft blanket. For once, it wasn't me shrinking into silence. It was her. I wasn't proud in the boastful sense, but I did feel a sense of balance. After years of being the target of her little jabs, after years of my son brushing it off, the scales had finally tipped back toward fairness. Aaron stopped by later that week. He didn't come with excuses, and he didn't come to defend Vanessa. He just sat at my kitchen table, glanced again at that recipe card taped inside the cabinet, and said, "I don't know how to fix everything, but I know I need to try. For you, for the kids, for me." That was enough for now. I didn't need him to have all the answers. I just needed him to see me, to finally understand that kindness is not weakness, and that his mother's dignity matters too. I've been thinking a lot about aging these days, about how easy it is for people to look past us once we're no longer in the center of their lives. They see the wrinkles, the slower steps, the smaller houses, and they think we're fading. But we're not fading. We are still here with decades of experience and love behind us. I spent too many years believing that if I stayed quiet, I would keep my place in my son's world. What I learned is that quietness doesn't earn respect. It only teaches people that you'll take whatever they hand you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the ones watching you is to stand up, even if your voice shakes, even if your heart aches. I don't regret what I did. If anything, I regret not finding my voice sooner. Because that night, when Vanessa saw her perfect party unravel, and Aaron saw his boss walk out early, they finally felt a sliver of what I had carried for years. And maybe that's what it took for them to understand. I look back now and realize I didn't ruin their party out of spite. I ruined their party because it was the only way to say, enough. Enough of the insults. Enough of the silence. Enough of letting someone else write my story while I sat in the corner, folding napkins and keeping peace. The truth is simple. Kindness is not weakness. Sometimes silence is power, and sometimes a well-timed truth is the only recipe that matters. To the women listening to me now, I want to ask you, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Have you ever swallowed disrespect just to keep the peace? Do you think I went too far, or was it finally fair? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own story in the comments, because your voice matters just as much as mine. And if this story spoke to you, if it reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend who might need courage today, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Because we all deserve to be heard. And sometimes the best way to remind the world of that truth is to stand tall and speak it plain.